Hello everybody! Today we're gonna talk about WALL-E, or as I like to call it, the best film ever made. WALL-E was released by Pixar back in 2008, and the film has aged surprisingly very well. Now of course you want to know why this film is the best film ever made. So in this video we're gonna dive deep into the masterful visual storytelling. We're of course gonna talk about the excellent character development of Eve and WALL-E. We'll discuss the themes of this movie and what it has to say about curiosity and connection. We'll analyze the social commentary of this film and how it has stayed relevant over the years. And then we'll wrap up the video with a brief reflection on the film 16 years later. So, let's begin. What makes films such a powerful medium is that it is able to combine a bunch of different things, but films at the end of the day are a visual medium. WALL-E is a masterclass in visual storytelling, and here's why. There's two components to the visual storytelling that I want to discuss: the character design and the subtle world building. Let's discuss the character design first. WALL-E and Eve are quite peculiar when it comes to main characters in a film. For one, they're robots. The whole point of storytelling is to explore human emotions and use those emotions to promote an idea. If your main characters are robots, that means they are not human. So the writers are already in a tougher position making their two main characters robots. Now what's a bigger deal than that is that these two don't even talk. Now of course they say each other's names, they say a handful of other words like directive, but the two for the most part are mute. Yes, films are a visual medium, but sound is also a major part of it. Hearing characters talk and convey their feelings is very important. So WALL-E and Eve are robots, they don't talk, and even worse is that they don't have faces. You guys know how CGI these days for the most part is really good, but nailing down the human face is still something animators largely struggle with. This is because we look at human faces all the time, so much so that even if a slight thing is off, we can tell. It's why it's so obvious when celebrities get facial surgery. Us humans can tell very easily. Now imagine having characters that don't have any faces either. WALL-E and Eve only have eyes, no other facial features. How is the audience supposed to connect with robots who don't talk and don't have faces? Well, through competent visual storytelling. Let's again look at the design of WALL-E and Eve. You don't really need an entire face to convey emotion. What you really need are eyes. Eyes are the gateway to the human soul. If you've ever wondered what makes a performance in a film so great, just look at the actor's eyes. Now, if you have a character that doesn't have eyes, for example, they wear a helmet, what the storytellers then do is give the character something adjacent to eyes, like a visor, for example. So the reason we are still able to connect with WALL-E and Eve are because of their eyes. WALL-E's most defining physical trait is his eyes. The way they move up and down, the way they shake when he's nervous, the way you can see the reflection of what he is looking at, it's all about the eyes. Eve doesn't even really have eyes in the movie. All she has is a screen as a face, but the animators were so brilliant in giving her these blue lights that serve as eyes, and these eyes change all the time. Eve is able to stare into the abyss, she's able to open her eyes wide when she's shocked or scared, she's able to squint when she's laughing or is unhappy, and she's able to even close her eyes. At the end of the movie, when WALL-E gets rebooted, the reason we can tell right away that something is wrong is not because he ignores Eve or he is crushing some of his possessions, it's because of his eyes. All movie WALL-E emotes with his eyes, so when they don't move at all and they're blankly staring ahead, we know something is wrong. A few minutes later, once he lowers his eyes, that is the moment we know that the WALL-E we love is back. I want to take a second to talk about the specific character design of WALL-E. You know why we find him so cute? Because of his big eyes, his big hands, and his overall small body. But do you ever wonder about the science behind why we find these traits to be so cute? We even see these traits in kids' toys. Well, it's because big eyes and small bodies are what a baby is. We are biologically programmed to think that babies are cute. So when we create toys or characters that look like babies, we think they're cute too. And this all ties into what I spoke about earlier with the characters not talking. Since Eve and WALL-E don't really talk, the writers need to find other reasons to get the audience to like them. Of course, making WALL-E so damn cute is a good start, but the other aspect of it is the most simple aspect of storytelling. Show, don't tell. Since the characters don't talk, we are forced to learn about them through their actions. is. We can all agree that WALL-E is a clumsy robot. How do we know this? Not because he says clumsy things, but because he does clumsy things. WALL-E is a robot for sure, but he's a sentient one that has his own personality. How do we know this? Because we see him do shit in the first 10 minutes of the movie that average human beings do. I'll talk more about these first 10 minutes when discussing the character development of WALL-E and Eve later. WALL-E is kinda like a little kid. How do we know this? Not because he sounds like a kid when he talks, but because he often acts like a little kid. Like the scene where he is chasing the red dot around before Eve's ship lands. Narratively, this serves as a reason to get WALL-E to leave his home and end up in an open field, but from a character perspective, it makes us think of WALL-E like a little kid, and thus we have a soft spot for him. Now, I could talk about the designs of the two characters for a lot longer, but I wanted to take a second to highlight what I think was maybe the most brilliant decision made by these filmmakers, and that was how WALL-E and Eve kiss. How are two characters without faces supposed to kiss? Well, when they get close together, let there be a little electrical shock that goes between the two characters. Right away, anyone of any age watching understands what this means. It also probably helps that WALL-E floats away like he is love-struck right after it happens for the first time. The sheer brilliance and creativity of showing us how two robots kiss and having it feel just as intimate as two people kissing is, again, one of the most incredible things I have ever seen in a film. Now, outside of the designs of our main characters, we have the world building of this movie. Now, there are only two places that need world building: the Axiom and Earth. Now, just because our two main protagonists barely speak, that doesn't mean there isn't exposition in the movie. When WALL-E is on Earth in the beginning, there are a lot of projectors and billboards of the old by and large CEO. On paper, this could seem like a really lazy way to expunge information to the audience. As WALL-E is walking by, just have one of the billboards say, "Head to our Starline cruisers to leave Earth forever." You may think the movie did that, but it didn't. So when this movie begins, we need to know the state of the Earth, why there are no people on the planet, and why WALL-E is the only WALL-E left. Now, as I said before, the billboards could explain all of this, but what the billboards actually do is illustrate the passage of time. Later in the movie, we learn the Axiom has been gone for 700 years, but we don't know that to begin the movie. So what the writers did was contrast the information we are fed from the billboards to what we are actually seeing on the Axiom. In the billboards we hear, "Join us on our 5-year cruise while these WALL-Es clean up the planet." Well, the WALL-E we know and love is the only WALL-E left. What happened to the rest? Well, they're all dead. If they're all dead, that means either the job was done and they are no longer needed, or they were unable to finish the job. And based on how the entire city looks, they didn't get the job done. The WALL-Es all being dead indicates clearly that time has passed, but it also indicates that humans are never coming back. If the WALL-Es are all dead and the Earth still looks like a wasteland, then why would people come back? Another indicator of the passage of time are the towers of all the trash throughout the city. We see tower after tower as tall as skyscrapers, and along with that, all we see is one WALL-E. And this WALL-E isn't the fastest at his job either. It looks like he was able to only complete one row in an entire day. So if it only takes him one day to complete a row, how long did it take WALL-E to build all these towers? Hundreds of years probably. Again, we learn all this through the visual language. So right away within the first 10 minutes of the movie, the visual language tells us all of this. The state of the Earth, the state of humanity, and the state of the WALL-Es are all established through very little exposition. Now, what else on Earth was there to establish through the visual language? Of course, we can't ignore by and large. I'll dive into this much later, but the film clearly has a message it wants to convey about mega corporations and their carbon footprint. How are they going to convey this? Well, they frankly go overboard a bit by showing us how by and large has a monopoly on everything. Mega stores, gas, banks. In this one shot, we learn so much. They have sports networks, 100% reused food, whatever that means, liquid air, luggage, and probably a bunch of other things I missed. Now, it is very on the nose that there are signs that just say consume, 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 and it appears that the motto of by and large is keeping power in our hands. Hell, the clips of the CEO are filmed as if he's the president addressing the nation. By and large is not something I believe is ever mentioned by a single character. I think maybe just the captain, and that is it. But it doesn't matter that none of the characters talk about it, because of how much it is shown in just the first 10 minutes. And all of this continues on when we get to the Axiom. There is so much great setup and payoff here that the visual storytelling accomplishes. So we already know that the Axiom has been gone for a long time, but we also got a glimpse of what space travel was supposed to look like for human beings. We see now of people being active, and the hover chair is only used for an old woman. But 700 700 years later, everyone is in the hover chair. This tells us how things have only gotten worse for humanity. There's lines all around the floor that indicate where people can go. This ties a lot more into the themes that I'll touch on later. But my favorite bit here when it comes to the axiom is what happens when this woman Mary gets her screen shut off. She looks around in awe of the entire spaceship, as if she's never seen it before. But we know that she's been on the ship her whole life. So what does this tell us about the people on the axiom? It tells us that they're glued to the screens and they never even look around. This is reinforced by other little details, like how no one is in the pool, or this one moment where two guys are talking to each other and they're right next to each other, but they aren't looking at each other. They're just looking at the screens. We don't need some robot telling us how over 700 years humans have become addicted to these screens. The visual language tells us. One last super minor detail that I just realized, and it's so funny because it's so obvious now that I can't believe I didn't realize it before. So we see the captain actually wear the captain's shirt, but since he's fat as shit, he can only wear it around his neck. He can't even put his arms in the sleeves. Again, it's something I've never noticed, but it's such a cool visual detail. Now, the visual storytelling in this movie is borderline masterful, but that still isn't the best quality of this movie. So let's now talk about this best aspect of the movie and dive deep into the character development of Wally and Eve. But before continuing on with the rest of this video, only 12% of my viewers are subscribed to this channel. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. It's time to dive into the best part of this movie, the main characters. Some may look at Wally and think he doesn't have a character arc, but that's not true. He does have an arc. It's called a flat arc. A flat arc is a character arc where the character doesn't change, but the character does inflict change on the other characters in the story. In a usual character arc, the character will have a flaw, they will overcome that flaw, and the lesson they learn along the way is the theme of the movie. In the case of a flat arc, the character already has a belief about the world, and they need to convince the rest of the characters to believe in that same belief. This belief is the theme of the movie. So let's see how this applies to Wally and Eve. As I described in the previous section, since Wally doesn't talk, the writers need to go out of their way to show us who Wally is. I talked a lot about the design choices made for Wally, so now I want to talk about his actions because it is all so brilliant. So when we initially met Wally, it would have been really easy for us to think he's an ordinary robot who compacts trash day after day after day. But Wally is not like other robots. He's really an AI robot. He has his own personality, dreams, goals, hobbies, etc. So how are the writers going to convey this? By spending the first 10 minutes of the movie showing us. In the first scene, Wally collects things, he plays music, he grabs his lunchbox, and he befriends a cockroach. The first 3 things are things that any human being does, and the last one is there to show us his kindness. No one likes cockroaches, they're the scum of all insects, but Wally does, and that shows us his gigantic heart. On the way home, Wally passes by some other dead Wallys and takes parts to keep him in tip-top shape. Not only is this great world building, as I stated previously, but it's great character development in that it shows us how resourceful Wally is. Wally then goes home where he metaphorically takes off his shoes, adds new things to his collection, and watches his favorite movie. While watching his favorite movie, he looks at the couple holding hands, clutching his own hands, and boom, we know almost everything we need to know about Wally. All he wants is connection. This is what drives him throughout the story. I love other little details like how he feeds his new friend or pet depending on how you look at it, or how the next morning after he wakes up he is still tired and he is stumbling around. And throughout the movie there are so many other little details, like Wally blinking when he sees Eve, Wally sighs when he doesn't impress her, or him exhaling when he's in love with her. All this serves to humanize Wally. But the most important thing this opening shows us is Wally's defining characteristic, his curiosity. If you want to learn more about the therapeutic importance of curiosity, I highly recommend watching Cinema Therapy's video on Wally. They dive deeper into the importance of curiosity more than I ever could. So check out that video when you can because it was a great resource for this video. Curiosity is so important because it's human nature to be curious. The reason our civilization has developed so much is because of our curiosity about what boundaries we can push. Wally is always trying to learn new things. When he finds something, he collects it. Another key characteristic of Wally that matches so well with his curiosity is his innocence. Wally shares characteristics with children and frankly with dogs that makes him seem so innocent innocent that we can't help but love him. WALL-E is an incredibly optimistic and joyful robot. He lives on a rundown planet that was destroyed by humans, he is all alone on this planet, and he still goes to his job. But not once do we ever see WALL-E complain or really look sad. In regards to the situation of Earth, this doesn't ever seem to be something that bothers WALL-E. The only thing he cares about is connection. This naivety is very childlike, and he reminds me a little bit of a dog when it comes to connection. WALL-E is the same exact way. All he wants is connection. And then after this entire opening sequence, Eve arrives. Now Eve, like WALL-E, is a robot that has her own directive, but she does have a personality. How are the writers going to show this? By having her fly around like she's having fun. It's such a minor thing, but this moment tells us that Eve is the same kind of robot as WALL-E, one with a personality. Now where Eve differs from WALL-E is that she's a bit of a badass. Just from the sound of rocks moving, she starts blowing shit up. So right away we know she's similar to WALL-E, but we also know she has a completely different personality. The scene where the two share each other's names is another perfect scene. The little mannerisms from Eve show us even more of her personality, like when she chuckles at WALL-E's name, or the way she says classified when WALL-E asks for her directive. Every line in this movie, every interaction in this movie serves a purpose, and that's what a tight and good screenplay does. Now I need to go back to WALL-E's arc here because I haven't mentioned it in a bit. WALL-E has the flat arc where he helps everyone realize the importance of curiosity and connection, and right after this moment with Eve, he begins to do that. He takes her back to his place and shows her all of his cool stuff. I love how she's curious too. This is the stuff that makes a character three-dimensional. Eve is clearly the more advanced robot, but she's goofy and curious just like WALL-E. This is what initially endears her to WALL-E, but at the beginning of the movie she hasn't gone on an arc yet. She still rejects his attempts to hold her hand because she doesn't understand it yet. I love how the plot begins to move forward because WALL-E's trying to give Eve the plant, which I saw as him trying to give her a flower, just like any guy trying to impress a girl. This kindness and curiosity from WALL-E is what ends up driving the plot forward. I'm going to flash forward a bit. So WALL-E gets on the Axiom just so he can be with Eve. He inevitably gets her in trouble, and this leads to her telling WALL-E he needs to leave. At this point in the movie, Eve likes WALL-E, but she is choosing her directive over personal connection. But then WALL-E almost dies, but since he is the WALL-E we all know and love, he kept the plant for her, and this leaves Eve thrilled. The entire sequence is so beautiful, man. Once Eve has the plant safely secured, she's allowed to let go, and the two basically dance in space for a few minutes. This 2-minute sequence doesn't advance the plot, it doesn't give us any new information, but what makes this movie and storytelling so beautiful is that we can enjoy little moments of two characters just having fun. Two characters who are burdened by the fate of humanity, but can still take the time to appreciate each other and form memories together. This is what the movie is about, that there is nothing more beautiful than people sharing moments together. For the past half hour, we've seen how all these human beings are just sitting around in chairs, consuming things left and right, and refusing any form of meaningful connection. So the humans are basically acting like robots, and it's the two robots who share the most human moment of the movie. Of all the positive things I could say about my favorite movie ever, the fact that these two faceless and mute robots share one of the most beautiful and intimate scenes in any movie is storytelling brilliance, and it always hits me so hard. And I love how this inspires two of these fat people to share a moment together as well, something two humans haven't done in a long time. So this entire sequence, along with Eve looking back at all the recordings, is what sparks her to change. All movie, her top priority was her directive. Give the plant to the captain and you will bring humanity back to Earth. I love how during the climax of the movie, if Eve puts the plant inside the container, then she accomplishes her goal. But during this scene, her motivations have completely shifted from external to internal. Her external goal was her directive. Her internal goal is saving WALL-E. By going back to Earth, Eve knows there will be parts that she can use to fix him, something that was set up so nicely in the beginning of the movie. So everyone works together to get the plant inside the thing or whatever, and WALL-E is saved, temporarily. Eve tries to fix WALL-E, but we can tell that he is not the same because of the expertly crafted visual storytelling. What brings him back? A kiss. The most intimate thing two people can do, outside of sex, I guess. WALL-E wakes up, he holds Eve's hand, and the movie ends with WALL-E getting what he always dreamed of: connection. One way you can tell that this script was perfectly written was because the narrative and the thematic climaxes happen at the same time. The plot is getting people back to Earth. The theme is about the importance of connection and curiosity. The Axiom is finally going back to Earth right when Eve saves WALL-E. And then when she brings WALL-E back to life, this happens at the same time that the people get off the ship and start rebuilding. When you have both these climaxes at the same time, you get a really powerful scene. connection, and that's what WALL-E does. Whenever I'm down or stressed out or really feeling any negative emotion, I think about this movie. This movie always reminds me of the most important things in life, and that's connections with other people. So thank you, WALL-E, for always reminding me of that. Now, WALL-E and Eve aren't the only parts of the movie that reflect this theme. Let's now transition into the rest of the movie and see what other thematic connections have been made. While WALL-E is often known as that climate change movie, what resonates with me far more than those messages are the messages about curiosity and connection. One of the more underrated aspects of this film is how it explores the human connection. When WALL-E arrives at the Axiom, we get a haunting picture of what the perfect life really is. Now, you may flinch at me using the phrase the perfect life, but I mean, do they not have the perfect life? These people are never bored, they never need to worry about hunger or thirst. They don't even need to move. They can be moved around all day by these hover chairs. These people don't seem to need to work at all. That's why they have the robots. Everyone here is treated as royalty and all information is presented to them at all times. When you look at everything we try to innovate, it is all leading us down to this life. Now, of course, we know that this is quite the miserable experience. We don't see anyone ever talk to each other face to face. And I find it so interesting that not once do we see any sort of family together. We see plenty of babies, but they're always alone without their parents. And none of these people seem unhappy per se, they just all seem apathetic. The phrase I like to use when it comes to these people is that they're all sedated. All these screens and activities are there to sedate people. None of these people have ambition, none of them wish to explore, discover, or invent certain things, none of them are curious about anything. And what's so scary about this is that this movie came out in 2008. Sure, back then Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter existed, but nowhere near in the capacity it did today. I grew up in the 2000s. During that time, social media and phone usage wasn't even remotely as close to what it is now. Smartphones were barely a thing back then. Today, social media and phone addiction is a real issue. You ever see in studies that people are going out far less than they used to, or that people aren't as active or social as they used to be? I think part of that is because people are sedated by the constant ability to consume. Nothing is more heartbreaking to me than when I see a family at dinner and they have their baby wearing headphones and watching something on an iPad. As we learned in WALL-E, the most important thing a person can have is connection. I love how this movie warned us what can happen to us if we're constantly sedated like this. And since 2008, things have only gotten worse. Of course, I'm not saying all electronics are bad or that all social media is bad. I've made and maintained some of my closest relationships through this kind of stuff. Hell, I even make YouTube videos. But what this movie goes to illustrate is far worse than social media. I find it so telling that in the movie they mention that it was year 700 on a 5-year cruise, and no one seems to care. Not even the captain cares initially. He just makes some sarcastic remark about wondering if his forefathers would be proud of him. One of the major symbols of this movie are the lines on the ground. Literally, they are just used so people and robots can move around the ship in an effective manner. But metaphorically, it serves as staying on the path. By staying on these lines, none of these people are being creative or piquing their curiosity. They are just perfectly complacent, staying on the path laid before them. Having everything laid out for you is not living life. Living is about choosing your own path and pursuing it to the best of your ability. I like the moment earlier in the film when the cleaning robot hops off the line and he gets excited for a bit. It's as if the movie is trying to tell us that hopping off the path laid before us is what will bring us joy, not staying on it. Now, the bigger symbol of this film is, of course, By and Large. I don't think By and Large is some metaphor of a specific company like Costco or something. I think it's largely a metaphor for the state of the earth. None of these people care that it's year 700 because they're constantly consuming content that they don't have time to care. When WALL-E shuts off Mary's screen, the way she acts is almost as if she awoke from a trance of some kind. She has lived every day of her life on this ship, and this is the first time she has bothered taking a look at the ship she's living on. By and Large has killed people's interest in life. It has killed people's curiosity. There's no need to be curious. Everything has been solved. solved. I love how every character in the movie WALL-E directly interacts with has this sort of awakening where they start to live life. I mentioned Mary already. There's John, who was helped out by WALL-E earlier in the movie, and I really like how these two got together later and shared an intimate moment. Now, the best example of what happens when you're no longer constantly sedated is through the captain. When we first see him, he's like everyone else, happy to just be complacent. But then the plant is brought to him, and this sparks his curiosity. He starts learning about Earth and what civilization used to be like. Those scenes are so nice because we see that spark in him. Once that innate human curiosity is piqued, you finally start to feel alive again. I love his energy towards the most minute things, like farming a plant that grows pizza. Oh, and how the way he learned about dancing was cut together with WALL-E and Eve actually dancing was perfect. And I really appreciated how what led to this fight to return to Earth was just the captain having his curiosity roam free. And once all the people stopped staring at their screens, they were able to work together to help get the plant to Eve and save WALL-E. As the captain says in a great quote in the movie, he doesn't just want to survive, he wants to live. That single line is probably the theme of the movie. Now, speaking of the scene where all the fat people help Eve and WALL-E, I actually really appreciated the inclusion of the defective robots. Earlier in the film, we were introduced to the defective robots. Now, when we think of defective robots, we think of a machine that simply cannot function properly. But what we come to learn is that these robots may be defective, but they are still sentient beings. All these robots can still think and still make decisions regardless of their defects. During the climax of the movie, those robots were there and they were the ones who really got the plan to Eve. This could be me really reaching into the themes of this movie, but I took this as highlighting the importance of flaws. It's flaws that make people people. It's aspects of ourselves that are unique, that make us special. Not everyone being the same like humans are in this movie. The movie ends with everyone working together to save WALL-E, and then promising that they will rebuild the world. This was actually something I noticed on my most recent rewatch, and I'm stunned I never spent the time to watch the credits. The credits show us how the robots and the humans are working together to help rebuild Earth. We slowly but surely start to see the world get better. The last shot of the credits is just WALL-E and Eve staring at a tree holding hands with grass on the ground and blue in the sky. And by the way, it's not any tree, but a tree that grew from the plant that started this whole thing. I mean, what a perfect image to end the movie on. It encapsulates all the themes of the movie in one shot. Absolutely beautiful. The themes of this movie resonate with me so much personally. I even made this shot of the tree the wallpaper on my computer to remind me of the themes of this movie. Now, as uplifting as this movie is and how much I do appreciate these themes, this movie does have some less positive themes we need to discuss. Now, if I were to give one critique of this film, it would have to be how it handles the main villain of the story. Now, you may say, Goldman, there's no villain in this movie, what are you talking about? You may think Otto is the main villain of the movie, but I wouldn't agree. Otto, unlike WALL-E and Eve, doesn't appear to be a sentient robot. It appears to just do the bidding of the real villain of the movie, by and large. Just like any good bit of science fiction, WALL-E is a critique about some sort of philosophy or idea. In this case, it is a critique of consumerism. The common critique of consumerism is that the negative effects of consumerism include the depletion of natural resources and pollution of the earth. WALL-E was released 16 years ago, and I find it so fascinating that this discussion only seems to be more relevant as the years go by. So it's pretty obvious that this movie is a critique of consumerism and the social system that it encompasses. If you want to watch a great video about social systems and how it applies to WALL-E, I highly recommend watching this video from Pop Culture Detective, as it was a major source for this section of the video. So the film tries to highlight the dangers of consumerism. We can see the benefits of consumerism in that all the people are living these easy and stress-free lives, but also we see how it impacts the earth. One aspect of this movie's critique that I really appreciate is that, again, there is no proper villain. It would have been really easy for, say, the captain to be the main villain. WALL-E and Eve want the axiom to return to Earth, but the captain won't allow it because he is a by and large representative, and returning to Earth is not in the best interest of the company. Hell, even when we get messages from the former CEO, rather than fix the problem, it would be easier to just stay in space. The reason I like that there was no villain with this idea is that I feel it takes away from the critique of the social system by simplifying it into a critique of one bad person's belief. If WALL-E and Eve were to hypothetically defeat this evil version of the captain, then it would send the message that all you need to to do is defeat the people in charge of these companies and all is good. This is not a proper critique of consumerism. As the movie stands, however, the way our heroes win in the end is that everyone has to work together, including the captain of the ship, to make change. So the message here is that we don't necessarily want to defeat the people in charge of these systems, we need them to help if we want to see significant change. Now, another aspect of this film I think properly supports this critique is how it presents the people on the Axiom. No one on board the Axiom is a supporter of by and large per se. None of them are against returning to Earth because they are so happy with the current social system. The reason I appreciate this is because when it comes to issues as large as climate change, it's so easy to put the blame on individual people. How many times have we seen marketing about doing your part to help protect the Earth? Quality Culture, in her video about WALL-E, addresses the myth of individual responsibility. The idea that we as individuals, if we all just work together, can make a real change. When in reality, it's the social systems that contribute to the overwhelming amount of pollution. Now, since there are no individuals that are representatives of by and large, the movie never tries to blame them for the state of the Earth. So again, this was something I appreciated about the film. To circle back to the beginning of this section of the video, what would my critique be? Well, there's never any real resolution to by and large's role in this state of the Earth. If you wanted to, you could interpret the captain shutting off Otto as him rejecting by and large, but I think the film needed to do a little more than that. When the humans land and begin to make change, I wonder what role by and large plays in all this. The beautiful end credit scene that I spoke about before shows humans and robots rebuilding the Earth, and other than one shot of the Axiom, there is nothing to suggest that by and large is still around. So is it to be believed that all these people who have been non-stop consumers of by and large are all in agreement that they need to forego this corporation? If not, then what's going to stop this cycle from repeating itself? At the end of the day, this is a kids movie, so I get that a critique of mega corporations wasn't the top priority of the ending of the movie, but I also can't help but wonder if the lack of denouncing by and large has something to do with the mega corporation producing this movie, Disney. This movie shows by and large becoming a monopoly with how it is involved in literally every facet of the economy. And since this movie has been released, Disney has only continued to buy other corporations and expand as a company. Now, you may wonder how a film critiquing mega corporations was even allowed to be made under a mega corporation. I addressed a similar question in my Barbenheimer video, the video that no one watched. In the Barbie movie, the film portrays the heads of Mattel as a bunch of greedy idiots. How could Mattel allow this to happen? Well, because Mattel doesn't care what you think about Mattel. They only care about how you feel about Barbie. As long as Barbie continues to make them money, they will be happy. So you can laugh at Mattel all you want, as long as you bought a $15 ticket to go see their movie. The same could be said for WALL-E and Disney. Disney doesn't care that this movie critiques mega corporations. They care that you bought a ticket and helped contribute to the $521.3 million this movie made at the box office worldwide. It's also why Disney has no problem selling toys of characters in this movie. They don't care that this movie critiques consumerism as long as you consume their products, which I have done, so frankly, they got me. At the end of the day, you guys know I love films that have something to say. I would prefer to watch a film that has something to say and it says it in a poor way over a film that doesn't have anything to say. WALL-E is a film that covers a variety of different things, including a critique of consumerism. The film's willingness to try to critique something at all is just another reason why I love this film so much. So, WALL-E 16 years later. Is there anything more to say about this film? This film came out 16 years ago and everything still holds up so nicely. The animation of the film is still great. The visual storytelling is of course a marvel. The themes of connection and curiosity will always prove to be relevant. The film's critique of consumerism is probably more relevant now than it was 16 years ago. But of course, the love story between Wall-E and Eve will always remain the most beautiful love story I have ever watched. Is it the best film ever made? Yeah, there are films out there like The Godfather or Shawshank Redemption, but this film will always be the best to me unless something in the future comes out that's better and deserves the mantle of the best film ever made. Next week, we're going to be revisiting the Star Wars series Ahsoka 1 year after its release, so stay tuned for that video. Thank you everybody so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to tonight the Claude Squad, and I will see you guys next time.